Holy Father, I thank you for your blessings. I thank you for your people here. Lord, I ask that you would guide our class and the interactions we have. May we seek your truth. May your Spirit guide our words and our thoughts. May we deal with each other with respect and sharpen one another. And may you be glorified in our conversations. In your Son Jesus, I ask these things. Amen.
Amen.
So we've been talking about stewardship is kind of the primary area. We've been looking really in the context of money, but as you look at money, quickly it becomes clear that money is less important than the very nature of the stewardship that guides both money, time, and many other things. So to give a quick update, we've got a few guests here. So what we've discussed so far, we started back in the beginning that our purpose, we were created to be productive for God's glory. As at the heart of it, both man was put in the garden immediately and was put to work. Long before sin entered the world, he was here for work and for production. And as time went on, we clearly see that the purpose of our work is to bring about a reflection of God's creativity and also to bring glory to Him. As we moved on, we looked at how God provides for our needs, provides our life, provides everything. Therefore, we are stewards of someone else's property. And that goes with not only our money, but also our time, even our thoughts, and every aspect of our beings are God's. So how do we use those in a way that is bringing honor to the Maker, the Creator, the Sustainer that provided that? If we're going to be good stewards, the nature of stewardship, if you're borrowing something's other stuff, we've looked and played out how that's going to inform us to take good care of that money. To not let the money or the time or the many things we're stewarding over run and just happen, but instead we tell them what to do. We have a plan and we follow through with it. One way of looking at a plan is a budget. I use that word lightly because I know that everyone who hears the word budget probably has a different connotation on that. But the high-level purpose of a budget is to say, instead of having my money go where it goes, I'm going to instruct my money where it's going to go. So that whatever principles and ideals that I feel are important, I'm going to set up a budget that says this is what my ideals would fulfill. Then you follow through with your money. So that's kind of the heart behind that. And then we moved on last week looking at the nature of good stewards on principle avoid the slavery of debt. And at the end of class, I gave a definition for debt. I want to reiterate a little of that right now, and I want to talk through that and start looking at some scriptures that help my reason through this process. So, debt is money that you have spent that you don't yet own. Would you agree? So, another way of looking at that is that time is effectively money in terms that the work that I do is the way I raise money. Someone may give you money. That occasionally happens, but the typical way most people find money and ability to take care of their expenses is by working. They work so many hours, they get so much money, and then they apply that money to the needs they have. So therefore, if you are spending money that you do not have, you're effectively taking future hours and constraining them to pay for what you have today. That's another way of looking at debt. Would you agree with that description?
Yes.
Okay. So with that in mind, don't worry, I'm not going down the hole and saying, hey, all debt's sin. Not where I'm going. But I just want us to understand the cost. If I choose to spend $10,000 today on something that I don't have $10,000 for, I'm essentially taking today what I can't afford, and I'm promising future hours to pay for that. And so what that does is it limits my future capability based upon my decisions today. Now obviously, God owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. He can change my situation in a heartbeat. But when we're looking at being good stewards, like the servants that had talents or the servants that had minas, what did they do with those things? They said, I've been given this much, I'm going to steward it well, and I'm going to make more, and they bring back more. And they've shown to be disciplined with what they have. So when we're looking at the question of whether I should go into debt for a particular thing, what I would call you to do is don't take it lightly. Ask the question, why am I doing this? Why am I making this choice? Is it what is based upon good principles and being productive for God's glory, or is it selfishness? Because I think you probably find decisions we've made that fall in both of those buckets. And so if we reason that way, realize that also if I make a decision that spends money that I don't have today, I've constrained myself in the future in some way. I've limited myself in some way.
So the question you're asking is, if you're thinking about the money, if you're going poor, or you're going, well, the budget, right? If you're going short or high on debt, right? So if you're making a poor decision, right? That means you're sinning. You know what I'm saying?
I want to first, what we're looking at is, I think that there are certainly areas in our life where we look and say, hey, this is a sin, we're not going to do it. And this is fine. But where we're reasoning right now is through the nature of wisdom.
It's something that I heard you said that I'm trying to understand better.
So what I'm trying to argue here is that what does it mean to be a good steward?
Right.
What God's provided. And where does wisdom lead you in terms of making decisions about the money that God's provided? And so that's the way I want to reason through this. And once we find a wise decision, then we have to apply that wisdom to the situation that we're in and say, do we need to change what we're doing? Is there a shift we should make to a correct course? Or are we completely off base and need to change directions? Or are we just getting confirmation, yeah, we are doing these for the right reasons and honoring God in the process? Carmen?
This is when you...
Go ahead, sorry.
Me?
Go ahead, Richard, finish.
When you were saying something selfish, that's when I said sin.
Selfishness is sin. Sure.
And that's why I said sin, because you mentioned something about selfishness.
So let me see if I can say it this way. In terms of our spending choices, if we are honest with ourselves, there will be choices we make that I think we will clearly see, that was a sinful choice, I shouldn't have done it.
Right.
But what I'm not equating is that I'm not trying to make some statement that all debt is sin. Scriptures don't say that, I don't say that. But I will say that we need to be wise in the way we approach the money, and Scriptures do speak to debt. It speaks to handling of money, and that's what we want to learn from so that we're guiding our process and our instruction of our own money in a way that's godly. Carmen?
Yeah, I have two different angles of this. One of the angles I have is we had to first of all come to the realization that nothing is ours, that all is God's. And the money so we're talking about good stewardship, right?
Correct.
So something that came to me last night is that everything that I have belongs to God. And they're like talents that he talks about in his parable, and one day God's going to require those of me. And he may not physically take those things away, but well, maybe it will be at the very end when I die. He might say, what do you do with this and that and that? You know, so I would say that as far as spending and that goes, we should measure it at the appointment, at the what are we doing with our money?
So one of the principles we brought up stewardship, which I just remind since you're kind of touching on it, but we see in the parables of the talents and the parable of the minas that when the stewards came back, the steward with the one that hit the mina, or that hit the talents, God took that and gave it to who?
Those who had more.
The one that had 10. And so if you're thinking equity, that doesn't really work right? So the one who had 10 got more. The one that had 5 at that point didn't get anything extra, and the one that had 1 had it taken away. You see a picture that's not equity, which is often what we look at in terms of that of money. And yet, why is that? Well, he clearly states why. He says, to whom has done well with a little will be given a lot. Or who has done well will be given more. And we talked through that principle. What that says is that if you're managing the resources that God has given you well, and using it for His glory, the more He puts on you, hopefully the more glory to Him you're bringing, the more honor you're bringing to God. Therefore, God adds more to it. That's what we see in Scriptures in terms of direction that He takes. Yes?
You're going back to selfishness. There's a scripture in the Bible where Jesus says, use your money to make friends unto eternal life.
Yes.
And that's just one of the ways you can bring glory to God. Another way you can bring glory to God is the Bible also says giving. You get going in a church bucket.
And we're going to get on giving soon. I want to keep at the heart of the theology of which we're building. I think we're mostly complete with the theology. I just want to get on the understanding of debt this morning. Get a really good understanding of that so that we can begin to look at our own situations and make better decisions. So I've given a picture of debt here. I'd like your comment on that definition. Do you disagree with it? You think it should be worded differently? What do you think? Yes.
I think sometimes we need a debt. It's necessary. But,
Meaning?
yeah, for instance, you need it for your job, or you need for a car, because if you don't have, or a house. But I think if we go in debt, we have to be aware that we have to pay interest, that we have to pay more than if we would save the money first and then buy it. But sometimes you can't, you have to do it. But then you have also to make a budget to bring this debt back, and to even your everything you need to pay during a month, and not to go in more debt and more debt. That's the dangerous.
So I want to flesh that out a little bit, and then I'll take the extra comments here. What does it mean to make ends meet each month? If it's simply a definition that says I can put food on the table, and I can keep my utilities on, and I can pay all these car bills and house bills and other things, but I'm always using every last bit of money I have for my own needs.
That's a bad budget.
We have a problem that's saying, where are we getting to the point where we can begin to expand and help others? Because I think that's the picture, that when using money righteously doesn't just help me and my family, although it does certainly help me and my family. It's meant to be something that we can branch out from that and do further and more work. If we tend to spend more on ourselves only, we may be missing some of this heart of it. Yes, Christiana.
Maybe the most important thing with a budget is that you keep it. I mean, it's easy to make a budget.
It's very hard
But then
to keep
stick
one.
to it.
And everyone who's ever kept a budget, guess what? They fail a lot. And but the only true failure is when you keep trying to do something and then you give up. That's failure. But when you keep trying, you keep adjusting and keep working and growing, it's healthy. Jeff.
I agree with your definition.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
I saved up to
Thank you, Jeff. Yes.
I saved up to when I was at Market Basket, I made like $50, $50.80 per hour. No, $8 an hour. I get paid on Friday.
So you're saving up your money. That's good. And
So I saved the 50 all for like 5 to 6 months.
it's good. It's good.
And I came out with like $500 or $600, and then I got robbed clean.
Sorry to hear that. Well, I want to jump into this debt issue. I will stay on this for a little bit, so work with me, Richard, here. Carmen, you got a comment on the debt?
Yeah, comment on debt.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, the thing is we have to realize we're in debt to God too.
Yes.
For singing His Son, and I think that should be a term of Oh,
That's actually the heart of stewardship. It's doubly indebted because
Yeah.
who created us?
God.
God. Who gave us life? God. Who gave us everything? God. So you look at that and you say, okay, if I had never sinned, I'm still completely indebted to God. However, not only does the scenario that I sin, I mess up, I've rejected God, and then God comes and redeems me and gives me a way back. So it's doubly indebted at some level. So yes, I think the stewardship nature that everything we have is God's, and we need to use it for His glory. Now that's going to look different in every situation. There's not like some cookie cutter answer that says, well, if you don't spend so many dollars on mission work or whatever, not at all. That's crazy. And you need to use the wisdom, though, of these principles, and then look at your budget and say, what am I doing? And I think that's where we want to go. If you open up to Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7, I want to show you another part of wisdom from Solomon that says, here is how debt looks, another definition for it. Who could read verse 7?
The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower's servant to the lender.
Okay, so what's this nugget of wisdom telling us? How is it describing debt?
You're giving up your freedom when you're in debt.
Yes, very well said. You're giving up your freedom when you're in debt, which is kind of that idea that I began with my definition, that I promise my future hours, my future time, I've constrained them. I can no longer just hop up and do anything. I now have to do something that takes account to those hours that have been committed. And so that's part of that slavery aspect, yeah.
So while I agreed with most of your definition of debt, I disagree with that part that you just reiterated. So, well, you could use any number of examples, but if I chose to, I don't want to go in debt, I somehow interpret Scripture as saying that if debt is not a sin, it's something to be avoided at almost all costs, and so I choose to rent instead of buying a house, I might be spending more money over the next 20 years and thus giving up more of my future time, not less.
So we can flesh out scenarios, and I can counter argue that in a heartbeat.
You can counter argue it in a heartbeat, but it's.
But here's the thing: I want to get to those points. I first want to say I don't want to take our definition and constrain it by what we know to be normal. I want to constrain it by what Scripture says. So Scripture, let's see if we can get a better and better definition. And then we'll sit and say, all right, what do we do about renting versus owning? Because there's wisdom on lots of different directions there of how we approach it. You don't agree? That's fine. Go ahead.
No. It's just that twice, that was at least, and again, I agreed with most of your definition, but twice that's how you defined, or I'm not sure if that was your definition of debt, or what you were saying was one of the effects of debt.
The witches.
That you give up future time.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that
You're constraining future time.
and I'm just saying that I don't think that's necessarily true, and that you could counter argue and point out instances where it is true. Of course, there's tons of instances where it's true, but there's also lots of instances that I think are particularly relevant to many people who might be listening to this class where it's not true, and so I think we have to be careful about making that principle one that we use to make our decisions.
Okay, Joe?
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't totally agree with you, because I think all Chris is saying is when you borrow money, you're expected to pay it back later. I think that's all he's trying to say. And, right? I mean, if you're in debt, the idea is that someday, hopefully, you'll pay it back later. But I want to add something that maybe will make you happier.
All right, good.
So
I'm not unhappy.
there's
He
something
enjoys
else,
telling I'm wrong. This is great.
there's something else going on in the Scripture too, which you didn't mention, that I think is important. The first verse here, the rich rule over the poor. Okay, so there is a bad side to money when it is looked at as a class thing or a power thing, which it definitely has been used that way.
Yeah, we definitely have some, when you begin to apply that principle, you find areas where and like for example, if you take the person that's oppressed, the father that sells his child into some type of slavery to pay his bills, and that child truly is a slave, by no power of their own, by no choices of their own, is that right? No. Did they get in this debt on their own? No. Is it unfair? Yes, it's unfair. And so we wouldn't look at that child and say, bad kid, why did you do this? Why did you sell your life away? Because the child had no options. So that would be, I'd argue, kind of an incorrect way of approaching it, although it is a real issue, so that we have to be careful when we're looking through wisdom literature. Make sure we apply it in the context it's meant. And so for sure, we have kind of three big issues that drive debt concerns. One is laziness, which is definitely a big piece of what does it. We've got these cultural issues where you've got oppression happening, or some type of taking advantage of a person and controlling them. And then you have also just more systemic cultural lines that often make it difficult for a person to get out of an area that they may be trapped in, not so much to the perverse idea of slavery and of control and of abuse, but definitely in the terms of I was raised in the projects and don't have the education, don't have the capabilities, don't have the resources. What do I do to get beyond this? Which is a big question in poverty alleviation within America. How do we deal with inner city works where you can't just say, here, I'll give you a job. It doesn't work that way. It takes more. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes thought. And so all of those issues play into it. And those are three big zones that affect why people have poverty issues. But most of what the Proverbs deals with is more on that first category of laziness. They call us to the task to the extent by which I'm able to affect change, affect it wisely, and entrust those systemic issues that are outside my control to God, who is over them. And so I do think that is the way that you should approach your own finances. To what level are you pushing forward and doing righteously with your money? To what point are you being diligent? To what point are you not abusing others? Look at those issues. And then if you see true issues that you can't affect, but you see as a problem, bring it before the Lord. Because He's bigger than that problem. Martin, you got a comment?
This isn't very well formulated, but it's something. There is the leading it to the Lord, but also realizing that we're working for the Lord.
Yeah.
So we can
be the hands and feet there.
Yeah. We're talking about the city. I mean, we know some examples of where the church is there and doing some good work with people. For the most part, I don't think the church has done a very good job of that.
Well, I mean, you're bringing out James. I mean, obviously, like where James says, hey, be warm and well fed, and then goes on and doesn't do anything. That's not following that principle. The principle says that I do everything within my capacity to both be diligent, never complain about my own funds because I'm being lazy. That's my own fault. But do everything I can. Look for wisdom to how to do it better. Look for the areas where I can affect change, where there is poverty problems, like I mentioned before, and deal with it. Yet, there comes a time where you says, I've done everything I can. I can't do anymore. So Lord, open my eyes to something more I can do, but make change here. And bringing it before the Lord is the right answer. Obviously, we can't do anything lazily. I mean, to say, hey, I'm going to, Lord, go fix these problems. Good, now I'm going to go eat some lunch. And that's not a proper execution of Scriptures.
The trap it's easy to fall into.
It certainly is.
Like say, you're right. If you're praying for the poor, pretty good chance then that the Lord's going to do you to actually do something.
And we're actually going to talk a lot more about that in the giving side, because I think a lot of people throw their money in the plate and say, I'm done. And obviously that's, you can't read Scriptures and think that's consistent. And believe me, there's so many sermons given over the years, although I haven't heard them here, but I have heard of them, and I've heard snippets here and there, just really bad usage of money, bad distortions about you've often, even the Baptist realms, it's almost a joke of that if you go, you have to basically pay for your seat. Now, granted, I don't believe that, but I'm saying I hear that a lot more in certain denominations that happen. You probably find in church cry circles too. But nonetheless, I'm not going there. I'm trying to biblically follow out how do we represent what we've got before us. How do we begin to pray through it and find the right paths that are going to honor God? And let's follow it. And I can't tell Teo exactly how he should spend his money. I could probably give some advice and some ideas, and he can give me some advice and ideas, but we really need to get before the Lord and take these principles and apply them to our own situation and figure out how to best honor God. And it's going to be a moment-by-moment continual process of improving. Yeah, John.
Does the wages of sin is similar to wages that you make?
Well, I think the wages of sin says is the kind of context there is that when I work toward a particular goal, I get paid for that work. And so if I'm accomplishing something like a crops in a field or making a house or building an integrated circuit, I get paid for that production. And so if I sin, the payment for that production or lack thereof is death. That's what that passage is talking about. It's just saying that if you're truly getting paid for what you're actually adding, which we'd like that all jobs be that way, but most jobs, sadly enough, aren't, which is why Dilbert has a living. But nonetheless, if you look at the nature of sin, what does it earn? Well, it earns death. So that's the context. All right, so next passage, Romans 13:8. Maybe this is in the context of subjecting yourself to our government, but in the context of looking at that and saying, the government's there for a purpose, treat it with respect, do what you need to do, and therefore you won't be afraid of it. But then it goes on to talk about taxes, and someone read verse 8 for me. Okay, Jeff?
Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For he who loves his fellow man has fulfilled the law.
All right, so play that down in practical ways for our day-to-day budget. It says, owe no man anything. Or fulfill that debt quickly, however you want to state it. Owe nothing to anyone except to love one another, that we will continually give. So in terms of, if we look at the nature of the stewardship side of that, whether it be finances, time, whatever that commodity is that we are indebted for, what are we called to do here for it? Yeah, Jeff.
Well, one practical application, which I'm trying to get better at, is to pay your bills on time.
Okay.
I mean, that's a debt of sorts.
So when you pay your bills on time, you're basically paying for a service you likely received within a month.
And you don't get penalized.
Huh?
You don't get penalized and have to pay more.
Right. Right. And so, which you can go all kind of, if you want to get into the examples, look at credit card. If you put $100,000 on a credit card every month and pay it off at the end of the month, are you in debt? Yeah.
Temporarily.
No.
But no. Yeah, but no. It's not a, you could be real legalistic and get on one side and says, well, you owe that credit card company $100,000 that ramped up over the month, and so this triangle of area under the graph is what you owed, and so you were in debt for that point. Or you can take the other side and says, no, you've got the money, you're paying for your debt, you reserved it, and you're simply having a broker in the middle that's helping exchange the funds, and so you're not in debt. And I think both arguments are fine. I tend to lean more toward the second one. I think as long as you're using that broker wisely and carefully and not being unwise with your spending by use of it, okay, fine. It's not really a debt issue here. Now, if you keep that on from month to month, at what point does, with that second definition, does this become, oh, this is debt?
You mean if you don't pay it?
Yeah,
First month you don't pay it.
fair enough. And so that's what the constraint that you have there is that it's not debt up to that for the first month, but if you leave it on beyond that first month due date, now it's debt. It's a fair answer. I'm happy with that. So if we have debt of that type, what should we be doing?
You should be paying, you're asking for a very sort
Very,
of,
yeah, practical
you should be
answer
paying
to
your
follow
credit card
Scripture.
bills fully and completely every month, barring some completely unforeseen disaster, like some completely unforeseen health care cost for your family or something. Barring something like that, you should be paying your credit card bill every month. Unlike some other kinds of debt, there's no equity you have in your credit card debt. It's just, and the interest rates are brutal. I think it's very difficult to make an argument that, again, outside of some, truly unforeseen healthcare type situations, I think it's very hard to make an argument that getting into credit card debt is ever the prudent course.
By what measure do you make that argument?
What do you mean?
So I agree with you, but I'm saying, how do you biblically reason that? Or is it just more, hey, this is my gut, this is what I feel?
No, I think, well, look, we all tend to, here's my conclusion, and then, oh, but it's everything you just said. But I think that using all the principles that you've been talking about for the last few weeks, that if you were to say, wait, taking on credit card debt, spending on your credit card a few $1,000s a month and only paying the $26 minimum, as opposed to mortgage debt where you have equity in the house, I think that using the principles that we've been discussing for the last few weeks, you can draw a stark difference between those two kinds of debt. And using even the principles that you were talking about earlier in terms of what am I giving up looking forward. Well, obviously in the case of credit card debt, I am giving up, I'm going to have to make that up somewhere. And again, in terms of something like a mortgage, I would argue that if I was renting, I might be actually giving up more. So I think that I'm applying the very principles that you've been laying out for the last few weeks.
The reason I bring that up, I'll get right to you, Jeff. The reason I bring that up is there's an emotional, situational influence into making that decision. For example, if I gave you the scenario of the single mother who's struggling to make ends meet is only putting every last dollar onto her food, she's cutting her budget back, she's going times without lights just because she can't afford it, and she's doing everything she can to survive. And she has a little bit of debt with her electric company because it took an extra 2 weeks to pay off one of those loans. We look at that debt and say, our heart goes out. And we don't say, oh, that's bad, you went in debt. No, we say, let us help you. Now, on the other case, you've got the single mom with the kids, working 2 jobs, struggling to get by, and she's taking her kids out to McDonald's a couple times a week. She goes out on her own, she's spending money. She went on a cruise last week. I mean, and now she's got credit card debt. We look at the same girl and say, you made lots of foolish decisions because you let the stress of the situation make you go blind to what was proper. And so one, I'm ready to shell out money and help him out with. The other one, I'm like, I'd rather walk with you to help you work through proper use of money before I ever give you any money. But both have debts that are, depending on how we set up the scenario, that look similar. And one we would say, this is good. One we would say, no, it's not good. So I'm just going to say there's an emotional aspect, so we're not going to get a blanket statement for every case, but we can begin to really, we got to get into the situation to know. Jeff, go ahead.
So to put it in just a few words, it matters how you got there.
It does. Absolutely does. And I think if you ask anyone how they got into debt, their picture of it's probably going to sound a whole lot more rosy and spiritual than it might have actually been. Yeah.
But all that being absolutely true, and I agree 100%, still, credit card debt is a particularly imprudent way to deal with your situation. So you take either one of those women in your scenario, and if they have other options, if there's a family member who can help them out temporarily, or, you know, or frankly, not paying your electrical bill for a couple of months would probably be a more prudent choice than to get into credit card debt, which by its very nature is going to cut against a lot of the things by the amount of interest that but also
it becomes enslaving.
Right, exactly. You become a servant to it very quickly because it's also so free and easy. You know, I can remember the first time when Maria was about 10 maybe, and she, you know, and whatever, everybody probably has the same story. Oh, you get that for free when, you know, you just pay with the credit card, you don't have to give any money. But that, you know, there's plenty of grown-ups who obviously intellectually understand that's not true, but live as if it is. So I agree completely with what you said, but I also think the credit card debt is a particularly radioactive type of debt.
Absolutely. And, yeah, go ahead.
This may be going in a slightly different direction, but the discussion reminds me of, I think it's Paul writing to slaves, ends up saying, like, if you're a slave, like, don't let that bother you, but if you can gain your freedom, then you should. And I think in many cases that, like, as we've been describing, debt is a kind of slavery, and I think Paul's saying, like, if you can be free, you should do that. That's better all the way around. You know, and if you're in some situation where that's not possible, well, that is the way it is, but there's this clear goal that we want to be free so that we can be God's servants.
Agreed. So we actually touched on the Good Samaritan before and saying the Good Samaritan's going down the road, sees someone in need, and he's actually able to take care of him. It definitely a cost to himself, but he actually had the money to pay. He gave the innkeeper coins and said, take care of this person, if I'll come back and I'll pay anything else that's needed. If you can't pay your bills each month, you can't help someone else. With time maybe, but you can't help them with is completely. You're limited. And so I think that's one of these areas where when we let ourselves take today what we could make hard decisions like, hey, I'm going to live without electricity for a few weeks. There's no way of watering that down. That's hard in today's society. Especially when you can't have open flames in your house. I mean, it's a big issue. Yet, sometimes a decision like that makes more sense than going in debt because you're constraining yourself. However, what I see in scriptures is that if you are responsible with little, you'll be given more. And now, I know we can pervert that when we say, all right, that means the rich people are responsible and the poor people are not. I don't think that's what it says either. Every situation's individual with God, but I would say that if I'm faithful in this, God will take care of me. How's that going to look? Well, I don't know. I'll figure it out. But I can rest in the fact, because he says, if you seek me first, I will take care of your food, your clothing, your shelter. I'm good. If I'm content with that, which is where we're going to get at the very end of our class, not today, but the end of the series. We have to be content with what God provides. But anyway, so we've, all right, we're running out of time here quickly. So we've looked at a couple scriptures. One, the nature of when we spend money today, it is promising future commitment of some sort, whether that be money, time, energy, and that creates a form of slavery that we need to be mindful of, that it doesn't come for free. It's not just, hey, I'm going to swipe that card and not think about it and I'll deal with it later. That's not a wise way of dealing with it. Instead, we need to say, how do I plan? I need to be a good steward and tell my money what to do. So I'm going to create a budget, and I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to go out to eat tonight. Then I open up and look at my budget for eating out and say, I only have $3.46 left. Okay, where can I go out to eat tonight? McDonald's, that's it. And I can't take my family with me, which is kind of selfish. So I have to, that's the way you have to reason through it. Or you're really not telling your money what to do. Your money is just kind of going where it goes, based on your whims and things that are less controlled than the principles that you do on the front end. And we described that before, that like I think I mentioned this exact situation when your guy and a girl go on a date and they're open for suggestions of what they do. It's a dangerous mix. It's volatile. It's risky. Yet when they plan, they set clear guidelines. Hey, we're going to stay pure. We're going to do X, Y, and Z to make sure that we maintain purity. They made a budget, and they are following through with that budget. And it's going to, which I want to get under our minds for debt. The next area I'd like to jump into next week is, actually, yeah, I got this earlier than I was thinking too. We're going to jump into contentment. How do we respond to when I don't actually have the things that I think I need? How do we begin to reason through that to make sure we have a biblical representation of our lives? And because I think it's that, as I mentioned before, the mother that's like worn out and working 2 jobs says, I'm just going to go out and put on the credit card. I understand it. My heart goes out for it. But is that smart? Is that contentment? Not really. So we're going to look at that and see how we can apply these principles to actually managing our budgets well. And then we're going to move on into the nature of giving. And then we're going to catch some of these open questions that y'all thrown out. So thank you very much. Any last questions before I close? All right, let's pray. Holy Father, you are wonderful. You are faithful. And I thank you for taking care of our needs. I thank you for your wonderful promises of food, clothing, shelter when we seek you first. Lord, help me help your people here to seek you first. Lord, I pray for wisdom as we look through the nature of debt and the risks and the risk of going into debt and the ways it can constrain our lives in ways that interfere with your plan. Lord, I pray that you would give us clear understanding and clear steps to take to be more faithful with the resources you've given us. It's in your Son Jesus that I ask. Amen. Thank you.